Hello everyone, my name is Guillermo Haro, and here we are at the home offices of Debt America and also Optima Tax Relief. And this is a long-awaited conversation we've been waiting to have. To my right here, I have Charles Hughes, the Business Development Director from Debt America, and to his right, we have Harry Langenberg, the founder of Debt America. Good to have you here, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, actually, it's good for me to be here because this is your home and I'm just here visiting, so good. So if I can start off with you, Harry, for a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the vision? How did you found a company that helps America rid themselves of debt?
Yeah. So, Guillermo, when I started in the consumer finance space, as I mentioned, I had a mortgage background. And around 04 or 05 in that industry, my team recognized that at some point, after doing many, many debt consolidation loans and paying off huge amounts of credit card debt, that at any time that it was going to become difficult for those consumers to refinance, that there was going to be a significant debt problem. And around 05, 06, we began to look into other potential solutions, products that would be meaningful for consumers. And we looked at a product called credit card counseling, which would reduce one's interest rates, but they'd still pay off in full what they owed. We looked at bankruptcy, which unfortunately became a very large space, but we didn't want to have anything to do with that. And we looked at different roll-up strategies in teaching consumers how to try on their own to pay off debt as quickly as they could. And there's certain advantages to each of those models and disadvantages. But we discovered one product, which at that time it wasn't like a very popularly known, or it was more of a niche product called debt negotiation. And it's a product where if you did have a lot of debt, it could be a great alternative to bankruptcy because we could ultimately negotiate with your creditors and put you in a position where you could afford the savings payments that you would need to accumulate in order to settle for those discounted rates.
So just so that we're clear here, Harry, Debt America is not in the bankruptcy business.
Not at all.
No,
so
there's no BK, there's no
as
damage.
I said, it's meant to actually prevent consumers from ever having to file bankruptcy.
Okay. And most of the people you help right now, who is your end user? Who's the person you're looking to help the most? Can you explain to us who that is?
Sure. So our typical consumer has, on average, around $30,000 in credit card debt, although that can range from as little as, I think our minimum is around $7,500, all the way up to hundreds of thousands, depending on the situation. And the people we help are everyday Americans. These are people that are coming from all different backgrounds, work backgrounds, cities, lifestyles, ages, and debt affects everyone. And as we were mentioning earlier, what's remarkable about what we're seeing today is that the accumulation of debt by our typical customer is higher than it was even back leading up to the great 08 recession. And so we're trying to be even more proactive about connecting with them.
So we're at an all-time high in consumer debt like never before.
That's right.
Right?
So it just eclipsed earlier this year, I think $4 trillion is the number that was, as we were talking, broken up between auto, which is about $1.5 trillion, student debt, the fastest growing, highest inflation category, with right up there with medical, is student debt at about now $1.6 trillion, and credit card debt or revolving credit debt has now just eclipsed $1 trillion, and I think that grew over the past 12 months. Right around 10 or 11%, so a meaningful increase, and that growth is putting a lot of consumers into a situation where they're becoming more stressed than they've been in a long time.
So let me switch over here to Charles now. Charles, you're a business development director for Debt America. You and I have known each other for about 10 years or so. My memory tells me that. You've seen this business, you've seen this industry just explode from, we mentioned 2008 or 2000, somewhere around there.
2006.
2006 was at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming a lot of people went through lots of bankruptcies and rid themselves of their debt. Then lenders reissue credit cards after a bankruptcy, 1 or 2 or 3 years after. And now consumer debt is right back up to that level and beyond. Okay. What is it you do to enter the offices of these leaders, different people that we work with, and what is your recommendation? How is it that these leaders can now bring this message to the end user, to the person in debt, to help them?
Guillermo, that's a great question. In fact, it's been one of the challenges periodically, because we'll have leadership has in certain offices had hesitation, and most of it's got to do with not ignorance, just a lack of knowledge about what our services are and how they function. So with that lack of knowledge, there's been some trepidation, and no, I don't want to get my client into this. I've heard bad things about it. I'm concerned. Mm. Ironically, one of the biggest influxes, and you and I have shared, has been a YouTube video that you put out talking about your 5 circles and discussing the debt management side and the imperative side to that. The more that becomes prevalent throughout the country, frankly, the easier it gets for us. When we make a phone call to an office and we want to get into that office for the first time, the introduction is typically to tell what we do, what Debt America does. Sometimes it's a news update to give them some ideas to the fact that things have changed. But the main piece that helps us is those agents that are seeing something on YouTube, seeing something at a BPM, and they've got that interest, they bring that to the leadership. So when we go to knock on the door and we talk to an SMD or we talk to a CEO of an office and we say, we'd like to come in and talk with your team, if there's ever concern or any kind of hesitation, just simply explaining one of the biggest challenges that an agent has with World Financial Group, probably the most difficult obstacle or objection to overcome is that notorious phrase, I don't have money. You can talk to me about a program, you can talk to me about an IUL, you can talk to me about education and savings, and these are all great, grandiose ideas. But if I don't have that cash flow to move forward, yeah, I can't do that. So that's how we get in the door.
Awesome. Harry, let me switch back over to you one more time, because I know you probably got to run in a few minutes here. So I want to get a specific idea of what we're looking at numbers-wise. We talk about the amount of enrolled debt today. Mm-hmm. We're looking at Debt America has enrolled over $300 million of debt that you guys are currently helping resolve.
Yeah, and that number is specific to the support that we have given to WFG agents. So that channel, you could say, through WFG, whether it's the agents or folks that have come in, clients of the agents, if you go back all the way to when we started that relationship back in 2008, so the 11 years we've been working together, the total enrolled debt is about $300 million. It represents around 12,000 clients.
So 12,000 individual clients have put on the books worth of debt that we're trying to help them rid them over $300 million. So that's primarily credit card debt?
Yep. So we only focus when it comes to negotiation on credit card debt.
So this is your Visa, MasterCard, American Express.
Guillermo, the typical client's coming in with anywhere from 3 to 10 different cards. And the commonality is that those cards are near their maximum levels, and there can no longer be continued maintenance of those cards to keep paying cards with cards. And so people have nearly reached their limit, and they need a solution in quickly.
Wow. It just blows me away how, growing up, they says you don't spend money you don't have. And that's obviously, that philosophy is out the window in these days.
Yeah.
People spend money they don't have. People make X amount of dollars and they have X amount of expenses, but they want this lifestyle. So then they go borrow the balance, the difference between their current earnings and their wanted lifestyle.
That's right.
And that's what gets them in this tremendous situation here.
You can go back to the root source of the problem, and we've tried to address that, especially with our graduated clients, by giving people information. But not many people operate on a budget anymore. That probably used to be the case decades ago in different family generations. But it really starts with financial prudence and spending within your means.
Absolutely. Harry, so what would you say across the board, is if we look at the world of borrowing money And of course, a student, for example, enters his first year of college, and they're introduced to a credit card. Hence, they have no income, but yet the credit card industry is looking for a new target. They're looking for a new customer. So they rely on the fact that the parents are going to take over those payments. Is that pretty fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have a student that's already financially challenged that now gets themselves and their family further into debt. So now they get a credit card for, say, $1,000, $2,000, and then it's almost a race to see how fast they can max it out.
Yeah.
Is that pretty fair to say?
Not only is it fair to say, but on a personal note, that example that you just gave is how I got my first credit card and how I got into credit card debt trouble.
So,
because coming out of college and getting into my first job and trying to afford my first apartment, it was tough to make ends meet.
It's just the craziest thing to me that someone with no possibility of repaying a debt actually gets access to money they don't own.
Yeah.
It blows me away. So
Yeah,
now
there is a vulnerability amongst students. I mean, there have been regulations to thwart that, but the credit card industry has a huge lobby, and it's well known, and you know they have amazing marketing and
Absolutely.
analytics.
Yeah. So second question with that, what if we look at the entire landscape of every credit card ever issued by every carrier, what is the average credit card interest rate in America today?
You know, interesting. So I saw another statistic, which will answer the question. But out of the $1 trillion that there is in total credit card debt, Americans paid $150 billion in interest last year.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Out of the 1.1 trillion that there is out there currently, Americans paid $150 billion in interest. And so if you do the math there, you're looking at around a 15% average, which I would say
That's
might
just
be
about the
around
Pretty fair.
Pretty fair for the number.
So for everyone watching this or listening to this right here, if you're sending kids to school, the notion is you got to be prepared that they're going to be approached by marketing companies on campus, online, a number of different ways, different outlets to trap them, to basically get them in the system and now start loaning them money by which they're going to pay 15% interest on a credit card.
That's right.
All right, but
And
having
you
said
know, what's even another ploy is these cards that sort of connect you with your favorite brand. You know, they have branded cards for every company now.
Correct.
And every sports team.
Yes.
And so
it's
it's
cool.
not just on the college campus. It's floating even back to the high school level, and
I
made to be a very
even
cool thing.
say goes before and earlier than that. That my daughter, the first Barbie set that she had was the cash register, and then she's got the cash register in the Barbie shop, and it didn't have money. It only had credit cards in the package.
So Barbie's in the credit card business too.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So it's brainwashing people from childhood on that the credit card is the means of commerce.
Wow. What is the solution to this going forward? Or is there a solution with regards to how you get people?
Yeah, we've put a lot of thought to that, and if you really go to the root source, it's an education solution.
Okay.
And I think the education comes from two angles. One is going to be the schools. So unfortunately, we don't get much personal finance education in the schools. I didn't. I'm granted my kid's just in elementary school, but coming out of elementary school, they haven't taught any personal finance there. And so what little that there is covered isn't enough. But the second...
Can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
You mentioned the education solution would be schools.
Yeah.
Now, let's really look at that a little bit deeper.
I was just going to say the second education ultimately is the family.
Okay,
And
but let's stay on schools though, because
stay on schools.
it's, I have 3 children.
Yep.
And my goal would be to send them off to an institution, a school system, a school district, so that they can be educated on the necessary things they need in order for them to live life in the future, for them to get the knowledge, to get the skills. Well, part of it is we're also, and this is no offense to anyone, but we send them to places called the school where you have these teachers that aren't financially disciplined themselves, that they're in debt themselves. So isn't that sort of a mixed message here? We send our kids to a place where supposedly the school is going to teach them how to get this financial education, and the school system, in my opinion, is doing a very
You're right.
poor job of doing
I
that.
agree.
Yes.
Teachers are amazing. We all know, how much they do for our kids.
Yes.
But they aren't necessarily proctored in teaching personal finance, nor are they necessarily personal finance experts. They have
Nor
their
are
own
they
issues
practicing
in many
it.
cases, nor are they practicing it. So, ultimately, schools need to bring in third-party representation to probably teach these subjects to their kids, or get their kids involved with WFG at an earlier age where they can start. If that's, that could be a great example, right? Where you have networking groups that perhaps those kids can lean on, that are formed by the family or school circle and help promote it.
Absolutely. You mentioned the second source of education or in my opinion, I think it should be the first source. The best education starts at the home.
Parents. That's right.
Right. So all of you parents that are not practicing good money habits, being a good steward of your own finances, the kids are like sponges.
Yeah.
I know mine are. Like the things I say or the things I do or the things I like, my kids are like following behind sort of my habits and my practices and the things that I say. And if they learn that mommy and daddy are pulling out a credit card to buy everything, so that's sort of, they think that's cool, that's the way it should happen. On the other side is there's very little notion about saving money and the importance of putting away money for the future. So one of the things, if I can share this with you guys, for my kids, we tell family members during Christmas or Easter or whatever it is, don't give them any gifts. If you want to give them anything, give them money for their piggy banks. So we have their piggy bank for their goals. So piggy banks, like one day you want to buy a house, one day you want to buy a car, one day you want to buy shoes. So then we establish their little portfolio of piggy banks, if you will, by which they see themselves making the deposit into the piggy bank. So we try to teach our kids to save money is cool versus pulling out a credit card to buy things is not as cool. I mean, is that genius or
it
what?
definitely registers. Yep. And I know for most parents, it's a challenge every day to be disciplined about leading by example, which I agree you said, that's the number one way to teach your kid good responsibility. They're looking up at us first and they're sponges. But coming out with unique educational tips like you just talked about, that's brilliant that you do that with your kids. I mean,
Perfect.
that even though it's a little thing, it's going to go a long way.
Yes.
And there's a lot of good books out there. I wish I could read more of them, but no further step than the internet to get a couple good examples of those types of practices that
So let me switch gears here a little bit if I can get into now. Let's go to an actual customer that Debt America has helped, and let's go through the specific. For our audience listening, let's identify the process of getting enrolled into the program. Once they're in the program, what happens? What's required on their part? How can the client help Debt America do their job? And then the fees, and then the end result. You guys can stay with me on that? And you guys can-
Charles is the
No,
best.
bounce back and
that's
forth on
fine. The program first about a year and a half ago we rolled out a portal that was designed specifically for World Financial Group agents.
Okay.
It was a game changer for the field because it allows the referral process to become much more streamlined. So if people are taking notes, hopefully I won't say it too fast, but it's going to be pretty simple. It's wfg.debtamerica.com. So once they're there and get themselves registered, it only takes a minute or two, but once they're registered, and by the way, for the sake of registering, be sure to people putting in your SMD, making sure that you're putting in your EVC, because from a tracking basis, we're outside of the World Financial Group family with regard to our services.
Right.
So once that's set up, you're good to go. If you sit with a client and you've got a client that's got financial challenges, if they're having a difficult time meeting the financial needs to get to that insurance program, or if they are simply in duress and can't figure out what to do next, they'll go to our portal and enter the client's information into that system. Once logged in and referred, it's going to get submitted to our sales team. We have a wholesale team of 15, which is growing quickly, that are designated specifically for World Financial Group agents. And
so let me stop you right there. So if a consumer out there has, say, the normal $25,000, $30,000 worth of credit cards, so they got $30,000 worth of debt spread out amongst, say, 5 cards.
Right.
And they're obviously struggling with the making the payments, the minimum payments. They skip a payment, they get the late fee. I mean, it's a mess.
Right.
So they enroll with Debt America. Now someone will reach out to them from Debt America and says, I need these items in order for us to start your process.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
And in reality, we're not going to bother the agent. We want to have you focused on what you do best.
Correct. So the Debt America associate reaches out directly to the consumer.
To the consumer,
Okay. Now,
exactly.
if the consumer speaks Spanish, you have a Spanish-speaking representative.
We have Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese. I think that's it at this point. And
Okay.
English too.
Okay, so English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and probably more to come.
Right.
Tagalog?
As a matter of fact, we do have Tagalog.
Okay, all right,
Yes,
so-
thank
Yeah,
you. Forgot.
actually-
All right,
Sorry
so
about
we have 5 different languages by which we can service people. Now, the representative from Debt America reaches out to the consumer. The consumer now gathers additional information that the Debt America person needs.
We can make it even simpler than that.
Okay.
If after explaining the program, I'm going to send you an email.
Okay.
The email will have a link in it, and you'll click on the link. It'll open up. You'll put in your name and your social and your information, and you'll hit submit.
Okay.
While I'm on the phone with you, I'll immediately have that information fed back to me. So I'll have the data, and if you're motivated and if you want to move forward right then and there, by the end of the day, we can have you enrolled in our program and planning on next month having payments that will be likely half of what you're paying to the creditors now.
Amazing.
And we can do it in just a matter
So
of
you
hours.
do need some cooperation from the end user. I mean, if someone wants to be helped, they got to be willing to cooperate with the request you're asking them for.
Absolutely.
Okay, so reply to the email, get started with the whole process. Now, $30,000 is on the table worth of debt that they obviously can't pay amongst, say, spread out over 5 different cards. Now, logistically speaking, Debt America goes to work with each and every creditor, contacting them, working out a settlement solution. Is that fair to say?
Close.
Okay.
To be more in detail, what we would initially do is the client needs to make a conscious decision to stop making their payments to the creditors.
Okay.
And instead of that payment going to those creditors on that monthly basis, they're going to put their money into a bank account that we'll set up for them.
Okay.
That cash will accumulate.
And that bank account is under the holdings of Debt America?
No, it's actually it's a federally insured bank account. It's
Okay.
just as well as it would be a bank of.
So they're opening up a bank account
Yes.
to start this debt settlement program?
Right. It's called a special purposes account for that reason. It's
Okay.
only designed for this purpose and only this purpose.
Okay, got it. Is that bank account under the client's name?
Yes, absolutely.
It is. And then they would have access to that money in case they need to pull it, or no?
If they wanted to, they have that option.
Right.
We try not to have that happen. So
Okay. Well, 'cause it
easy-
defeats the whole purpose.
Of course, you'd
Okay.
shoot yourself in the foot.
Okay, got it. So then the client has got to be pretty convinced that I need to do these things in order for them to help me.
Yes.
So make the deposits into that account. The account grows. Now there's money that you can work with to now negotiate a payoff with, say, Visa or American Express or Capital One or who have you.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. And now you have a legal team that reaches out to these companies. So, for example, Capital One. You have a legal team reaches out to Capital One. Hey, our client owes you $11,000. We have money to pay you off X amount. You agree, not agree? Is that kind of the way it goes?
We have negotiators.
Okay.
If they're not going to the table, or if they're not coming to the table with an attorney on their side of the table, then we won't do that either. To bring an attorney to the table is combative. So we find it to work with a debt negotiator that's going to be able to work, that's not in an attorney's based position. If we go to the table with an attorney, then we have chances of the creditor fighting back as well. We want to be as cooperative as we
You wanna
possibly can.
collaborate.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And really, Guillermo, that's the key. This is not an us against them. This is, I've been able to make my financial goals up until now. Something's happened. I've had hours cut, whatever's happened in my life, but something's happened and gone wrong. And as such, now I need help. So I'm going to have the negotiator call on my behalf and explain the scenario, explain what's going on, and offer a settlement or a reduction in what's total owed. So as an example, if my payment was reduced from $1,000 to $500 to that bank account, a few months in, we've got about $1,500 saved up. We call up Chase, we call up Citibank, we explain we've got a client that owes $3,000, going through hardship, he's got multiple obligations, he can give you half today.
So you mentioned the word hardship.
Yes.
So is it a statement, is it true that someone can qualify for the services Debt America and Optima Debt Relief or Tax Relief offers if they're going through a hardship?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's
what
why.
What if they're not going through a hardship, but they just have been maybe a little irresponsible? Is there any help for them?
That's not the purpose of Debt America.
Okay.
The Debt America, by definition, is a hardship solution.
Give me 3 or 4 examples of what it would be like for someone to say, yes, I've suffered a hardship. That would fall under what category?
Those are really easy to bullet point. You've got job loss.
Okay.
You've got hours cut, which kind of falls in the same category.
They're different, but they're
Right.
connected. Okay.
In fact, during the mortgage crisis, a big thing was underwriters were making $100,000 a year, but it was because they had so much overtime. I worked for a mortgage firm, and we received the notice that said, effective immediately, there's no more authorized overtime for underwriters.
So that would be
medical is a huge.
Okay.
category.
Medical's the next.
People
Okay,
Stumble
so-
on that. Divorce is another unfortunate category.
okay. What about illnesses? Or that would be
The category
that would
of
be
medical.
So we have job loss, hours cut, medical issues or problems, divorce. What would be another common one?
You know, another big one that happens with a tremendous amount of people in the United States is that we have family that's out of the country and we're trying to help them.
Wow.
So I want to send money back to my family to help them out. I live in California. If depending on the scenario, if I had left the basis of my father left New York to come to California.
So
or
remittances
an
back-
accident.
So
you know, like,
okay.
People don't have, as you know, much emergency savings vehicles, and if something happens to them,
Sure.
you know,
Okay,
they hit
so-
the speed bump.
For everybody listening here, so if you suffered a hardship relating to a job loss, hours cut, a medical issue, divorce, family assistance that you're providing, an accident of some sort, then that causes their economy to be flipped inside out.
In a
and then
heartbeat.
It starts immediately to rack up debt. Typically, all of these means you're going to need more money than what you already have. You don't have it, so now you go borrow it.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
pretty- And it's, how much of the debt, this is a pretty interesting question I've been wanting to ask. If someone owes, say, $10,000, $15,000 on a credit card, and we obviously see it, I get it all the time, all of us get it in the mails, we get these offerings from all of these lenders by these checks. So those are cash advance fees, right? These cash advance fees or cash advance opportunities or offers, they come with fees. It's immediately 3% to transfer that. So if you transfer $10,000 from card A to card B, this card B charges you $300 just to move the money. Is that correct?
And a lot of the fees or stipulations are in the fine print, so you really don't even know. It's just a very attractive check that you're getting in the mail, and it sort of people don't know what all the terms are that they're agreeing to.
And people can only do that for so long where they're robbing Peter to pay Paul,
Exactly.
or they're transferring debt from this card to the next card to the next card. But eventually that well runs dry. I mean, that.
Yeah, up to the point where they can't continue to extend themselves credit anymore, and that's where you sort of hit the wall, and that's when, we're working with a lot of clients. It's oftentimes too late for them to turn it around.
Now let me get on the other side of the table here and say, what if I'm a critic of yours? And I would say, well, why would you help people that are irresponsible to begin with? And there's a degree of irresponsibility, but if someone suffers a hardship, then that can be labeled something else different. So the question is, if I'm a lender, I loaned you money, I loaned you $10,000 in good faith, and I'm charging you a pretty decent interest rate, 14.99, whatever that is, and now all of a sudden you don't pay me, and then you go find a company that tries to undercut my profit. How do I look now? This is like, I don't look at you as a favorable ally of mine.
Sure, I actually I would look as a favorable ally. Historically, in past, the way a creditor determines an interest rate is based on the risk of the pool of people that they bring on. So if I decide to go out and find a collection of people with bad credit scores, I'm going to have clients that are going to have higher interest rates with the expectation that there will be default in that. That's an acceptable
There's a ratio
loss
of the ones that aren't going to pay
that I'm
or pay late.
expecting in default. And that's why I'm going to charge you 17% because of the fact that Harry's going to default, and it's going to offset that cost.
Let's also not forget that the credit card industry is one of the most lucrative industries
course.
in the world. These
Of
guys are
course.
making money hand over fist.
Of
They
course.
know their analytics. They know how to. They know their marketing better than anyone. And frankly, you got to ask yourself who's wrong in this equation.
Right.
Is it the creditors that are setting the traps, or is it honest, innocent people that are being provoked by them? So you could look at it either way.
Yeah.
This becomes, you understand though, that this becomes icing on the cake, is that if I'm expecting to have a certain amount of fallout, and then a certain portion of that fallout comes back to me and says, I'd like to make a compromise. I'd like to give you half of what I owe you. If I was expecting to lose everything already,
Wow.
this is extra. So
Different viewpoints.
So there's no animus at all there. Quite frankly, it's the opposite. It's
Despite the people who are not making their payments, so credit card company has a certain block of business that's statistically going to go bad anyway. What you're saying is the ones that are going to go bad, we at least can get you half of that money, so therefore there's a compromise in play.
for money I would have expected to lose anyway.
Nice. Nice. Now, what does Debt America charge a consumer to help them settle on their debt? Give me a scenario, $30,000 worth of debt, 5 different cards, my new payments, what are you going to charge me? If I'm the consumer, what does Debt America charge me?
The simple answer to that is that we have a sliding scale that varies. It will be as low as 18%, as high as 25% of the debt at the time of enrollment.
Okay.
That's the simple answer.
Okay.
I
like simple.
Now, if we get a little bit more complex, we do that because you come back to me and say, well, I'm paying 25% on my interest rates on my credit cards, and now you're charging me 28%. So how am I benefiting? That number is a flat rate. So if your rate is 25%, that rate, if I take that and divide it over the course of my program, and I have a 24 is an easier number, if I have a 24% fee and I have a 4-year program, my annual rate will now be 6%. And so it's much better.
No argument there.
In addition, the principal's gone down significantly and all around. In fact, one of the statistics we just recently came up with found was that there has been, you're saving at least $2.25 for every dollar paid in fees.
It's actually 264.
264,
That's
excuse
the
me.
industry study.
So that's an
the
industry study that we just had.
So typically a consumer would save $2.64 for every dollar in fees on average.
that's
pretty good return.
That's a
That's a
big
very good
that's a
The
return.
big
other
number.
point that Charles didn't bring up is that these fees are on a contingency basis.
Right.
You have to
which means
perform.
you don't pay them unless you actually get a result.
Right.
And I think that's
I wish most
important.
attorneys worked like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what he means by is if I decide in good faith I'm going to sign up, and 3 months later I realize, Guillermo, I just can't do this. I think bankruptcy has to be the route in my eyes because something else just went wrong in my life. If that were the case and there's no settlements that have occurred, that cash is yours. We've not collected fees. We've not charged you anything. There's a minor banking fee involved, but beyond that, that cash is back in your pocket, and frankly, covering the cost of a bankruptcy if you need to go that route.
So Debt America, the program you guys offer, would be a possible option, a possible solution for someone who does not want to go the bankruptcy way, or someone who does not just want to leave their debt out there and eventually end up in legal issues where they're being levied or they're being served by some legal representation from the other party. Going forward, what is as we wrap up here, because I know you got to run too, Harry, going forward here, for someone who's brand new to WFG, or basically brand new to the business world, say someone's had a background in construction, or they have a background in warehousing, someone's had a background in the medical field, they're not aware of all of this right here, and where can they go to read up on the details of the program, like the information we just gathered up here? Where can someone go get that information?
We have our retail site, which is going to be debtamerica.com.
Debtamerica.com.
Right,
Okay.
and that's a great jump-off point. I wouldn't necessarily want to put a client to debtamerica.com if I were an agent with WFG. All too often, if once they get excited and they see what they can get done, they'll call in directly and they'll bypass the agent, and we try to avoid that as best as we can. So my suggestion always is that if you can point your client to us, we'll do the education on that basis. We can provide the resources. We've got brochures and marketing material that's catered toward the WFG market, and so that's where I would go with that. But there's, the challenging thing with regard to statistics in particular is when you start doing studies, if you find the wrong site, the average debt in a household in the United States is $2,500. That's because that site is being sponsored by and built by the credit card firms. So it's so difficult to find accurate information. So the most important thing I would say is to push the client to us. Let us have the opportunity to educate them. If you're not a fit, Guillermo, if you came to me and asked me to enroll you into debt settlement, I would turn you away. I'd say that there's better alternatives for you. If you came to me and you had not enough money.
That does happen.
Absolutely. We'll turn away a client in a heartbeat if it's not the right fit.
Okay.
If you don't have the cash flow to come into debt settlement, we'll tell you bankruptcy is a better option. If you've just gone out and had a shopping spree down in Hollywood and then right after went down to Las Vegas and did a collection of cash advances on your cards, we'd push you away.
So it just shows negligence,
we don't want that. We're working with a client that is in good faith, has gone through a normal lifestyle and something's happened, there's been that hiccup. And amazingly enough, if you ask what started all this, most people will say, I have no idea. And the question that we typically ask at that point is that if you look at things, normally everything started from something in your life. And almost every time we ask that question, they can bring it back to one piece. My dad got sick and I had to fly back, and ever since then I've not been able to catch up. The divorce started, whatever the case may be. Frankly, the hardest, with a heartbreak that I've had, my daughter's in rehab, and my new husband, I couldn't let him know. So I paid for the rehab 3 times with my credit cards, and I haven't told my husband yet. It's heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah. It's life. It happens out there.
It is.
Wow. Harry, let me ask you a couple of more questions and then we'll wrap up here. As you see the Debt America business, and obviously you're the main man running this right here. I can't believe you've been in business for so long. You look like you're a few years out of school.
I get a lot of flack for that.
I'm sure. Well, no, it's actually a compliment, right? I wish I could look young all my whole life. I think I'm doing pretty decent at it. I want to ask you, right now, Debt America is in all 50 states?
That's right.
Okay.
Now, mind you that actually, if you look back at, there's certain states that do require licensing.
Okay.
And so.
What type of license would that be according to what state?
There's debt statutes in every state, creditor statutes, and there are certain cases where we're not able to perform debt settlement. And
In some states you can't do that at all.
that's right.
Okay.
So,
Do we know those states, or do you, right off the top of your head?
yeah, there's about 15 to 20 of them actually, so it's a considerable amount.
Okay.
There are some states where we have referral partners that we're able to work with, but fortunately, none of those states have a significant impact on at least the immediate WFG community that we're.
So let's go with California right now. If you're in California, there's no license needed.
That's right.
You can just refer the client. All right.
That's
So
right.
so you have that. And of course, well, if we can try to help everybody throughout the country, but there are some states that obviously have regulation or
regulations, that's
laws
right.
that
and
that
we
prohibit
have
that.
people that are working on opening those states up.
Okay.
And there's no licensing on the agent side.
There's no licensing on the agent side. Perfect. And then, as far as we know, from the WFG perspective, Debt America is right now an appointed company, or you guys are actually.
We're considered at this point in time as an outside business
So
activity.
you are a WFG OBA. So
Yes.
anyone who's securities license would need to register Debt America as an OBA.
Right.
Very good. And then I understand there's some talks about getting back on the WFG platform where you're just.
It's
considered
always
private.
something that we're working to, and nudges by people like yourself, Guillermo, would be a big help.
Okay, very good. We can do that. Now, let's talk about the opportunity from an economic standpoint to the referring party. Because obviously people do this to help people, but they also need to help themselves.
Absolutely.
What is sort of the down, the middle, the high in terms of what kind of compensation someone who's a WFG associate who's referring clients to Debt America? What's the average sort of check out there, or the low one?
It's an easy number. The compensation itself is pretty straightforward. We're going to pay either 1% or we'll pay $250, whichever is a higher amount
of debt
of the enrolled debt.
Okay,
right.
so I put a client on the books for $30,000.
You're going to get a check for $300.
$300.
Right.
Okay.
If you get a check for $10,000, or excuse me, a client with
nice.
$10,000, you'll get a check for $250.
Okay.
Because we'll never pay less than $250.
So $250 is the least amount of money you'll pay to a client or to an associate, and then or 1% of debt enrolled, whichever one is higher. I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just curious, sell me the dream here a little bit. What's the big check someone has collected here?
We have one that's off the charts. We have a person that's out of Florida, and she on a monthly basis now is averaging about $2.5 to $3 million worth of debt enrolled. So
$2.5 to $3 million of debt enrolled.
Right.
And I'm assuming these are multiple clients?
these are multiple clients, and,
Wow.
and so she's seeing checks. Her income from Debt America alone is anywhere between $25,000 to $30,000 per month.
Per month.
Right. That, in addition to, if you are an agent, what are you doing with those clients afterward?
Unreal.
So whatever you've done with that client to free up that type of cash flow, you've also now moved them into other services that are available through
Okay,
Wealth
now
Management.
that's sort of an example
That's
a little bit
off the end.
way northeast.
Sure.
Okay, so let's suppose your average, is it fair to say, what's your average check? If you take the highest, the lowest, what are you sending?
Considering our average debt is about $27,000 right now, so you're seeing about $270. That's going to be about your average check.
Okay,
One of the immediate things, the epiphanies that your offices have is, wow, that'll cover the cost of my AMA and my licensing, and I'm good to go.
absolutely.
So it
Well, it pays
works
for
in-
food, it pays for gas, it gives you some pocket
Absolutely,
change.
absolutely. It opens that door in a minute, and the other benefit to it as a brand new agent coming in is I can enroll myself. So if I am going through, some of my experience I've seen is that the people that probably value World Financial Group the most are the ones that are looking to try to get out of the trap
Absolutely.
of that job. And so.
Let me touch on that for a second. I think all of us that are in business, we have a duty to be a fiscally sound example to all of our clients, that if you're sitting in front of families and you're talking about investing and saving and insurance and all that, and it might be a good idea for you yourself to look at this program, so therefore you rid yourself of debt. If this is a channel, if this is an avenue that can help you, then you ought to do so. If it's not, then you ought to practice good fiscal habits so that you don't end up in one of these scenarios like this. Wow. A couple other things here for both of you guys. We have a gentleman in our office. Matter of fact, he's in public service in the city nearby here, and he submitted a case because we explained it to him. He got excited about it. He got a check for like $1,200 on a Debt America check, and just the talk of the office, like, wow, this thing really works. It's exciting. That person now followed up with the client, and of course, as you mentioned, their payments were like $3,000 a month. Now they dropped it down to half. That freed up another $1,500 by which now they can adequately protect their family with the insurance products. They can put away money for the savings, for the retirement, for the college education. My question to you is, what do you see happening to the people that are participating, and how have you been able to, I'm sure they reach out to you guys and say, hey, this company is awesome, the concept works, it's been able to help me. How so? What have you seen from the field, the people that are already doing it?
Guillermo, it's the part of the magic of my job is to be able to be in the offices across the country, and that there's been other professions I've been in when I get that tug on the shirt and say, I need to talk to you for a second, and that always begins a horrible conversation. In these instances, if I get a tug on the shirt, I know it's going to be a great story. Oh my gosh, you know what? I don't know what I was going to do. It wasn't just me. It was my mother that Dad died, and you've changed our lives. You've freed up the cash. You've given me an opportunity to move forward. You've given me a chance for the first time to get out of this mess. Mind you, and it's my firm belief that if you're older than 18, there's a good likelihood that you've not been out of debt since that day.
That's amazing.
And I bring that up in those conversations with a raise of hands so often. How many people have been completely out of debt since they've got out of high school?
Wow.
And there's not a hand that goes up.
It's funny how someone the other day says, if you want debt, make sure you sign up for credit cards.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
of
and
course.
I'd say, to your listeners that this is also something that's so prevalent, as Charles just mentioned, that it's an amazing conversation starter. It's something that everyone is affected by, and people always, have opinions on, how they got into a situation or want advice on it. So,
Wow. One of the things as we wrap up here, one of the things that we talk about constantly in our meetings and our presentations is how people should make it a goal to have more assets than debt. So think about it. Most people are comfortable owing $15,000, $20,000 on a car, $30,000 on a car, or $10,000 or $20,000 on a credit card, but somehow if they see their checking account that has, say, $40,000, $50,000, it's almost like they're spooked.
yeah.
And I look at it the other way around. You should be completely trying to grow your liquid assets and reducing your debt position. And of course, this would be a good avenue for someone to make this additional income by providing a good service to a consumer, but saving the money, not necessarily grabbing the money and quickly going to go spend it. So gentlemen, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It was long overdue. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Charles. Harry,
for
pleasure to
coming down
meet
and
you.
talking to
Thank you
us.
so much. And we'll be in touch with you guys there. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you very much.